Imagine this. You walk in your own workplace, a building where your word is the law, where people rise when you enter, where justice begins with your presence. But today, none of that matters. A police officer shouts, then slaps you. His hand closes around your throat. He forces your arms back, the metal cuffs biting into your skin. And the most chilling part? He has no idea that you're the judge who runs the entire courthouse. He's standing in a slow zoom in. Cold silence. What happens when the most powerful person in the courtroom walks in without power? This is the story of justice finally fighting back. Judge Kesha Williams had walked through these courthouse doors thousands of times, but never like this. Today, she wasn't wearing her black robe, no security escort, no courtroom entourage. Just simple jeans, a gray sweater, and a quiet morning routine. She was just a woman arriving early to work, or so it seemed. As she approached the security line, Officer Martinez stepped forward, eyes narrowing with hostility before she even spoke. "Stop right there," he barked. His gaze crawled over her like a threat. Kesha calmly held out her hands. "I work here," she said, gentle, composed. But he didn't listen. Instead, he smirked, a cruel, mocking smirk. "You filthy animal," he spat. "Try and sneak in? You think I'm stupid?" Before she could take another breath, his hand cracked across her face. Her head snapped to the side. Gasps filled the lobby. Then came his hand around her throat, tight, rough, unprovoked. He shoved her against the wall as her breath struggled to escape. People didn't intervene. They recorded. Some even laughed. Phone cameras aimed at her like weapons. The metal cuffs snapped shut over her wrists, cold, unforgiving. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from disbelief. And then, as Martinez dragged her forward, she looked up. There it was, her own nameplate, right above the courthouse entrance. Honorable Kesha Williams, Superior Court Judge, 20 feet away from the courtroom, where she delivered justice every single day, 20 feet away from the bench, where even Officer Martinez stood at attention whenever she entered. But today, stripped of her robe, stripped of her status, no one saw her. In '01 respected her. In '01 protected her. And yet, the worst part wasn't the violence. The real shock was this. But the real shock wasn't the assault. It was who he had assaulted. The holding room felt colder than a cell. Judge Kesha Williams sat with her wrists still red from the cuffs, the sting of the slap still warming her cheek. Yet her mind razor sharp, observing, memorizing, waiting, because she knew something no one else in this building did. Justice may bend, but she never breaks. Soon, an officer pushed open the door. "Move. You're being taken before the judge." She almost smiled at the irony. Taken before the judge, as if she hadn't been the judge here for 9 years. But she walked silently, letting the farce unfold. The courtroom of the temporary judge, Judge Randall Pierce, sat at the bench, flipping through paperwork with bored disinterest. He didn't look up when she entered, didn't notice the dignity in her posture, the quiet power behind her eyes, the grace she carried even in humiliation. To him, she was just another disturbance. Another case to clear before lunch. Officer Martinez puffed out his chest as he stepped forward. His voice turned heroic, practiced, dripping with false bravery. "Your Honor," he began, "this woman attempted to trespass through a restricted courthouse entrance. She became unstable, aggressive. I feared for the safety of everyone present." He paused, letting his lie hang in the air as if it were truth. The judge finally looked at Kesha, and in that moment, she saw it in his eyes. He wasn't evaluating evidence. He was evaluating her clothes, her plain sweater, her natural hair tied back, her calm, composed silence. Misread as guilt, he judged her by appearance, not identity, not merit, not truth. Martinez continued, gaining confidence as he felt the judge leaning his way. "When I attempted to question her," Martinez added, "she became combative. I had no choice but to restrain her. Lie, lie, lie." Every word was polished wrongness delivered with absolute certainty. And the courtroom absorbed it. The chorus of false. Two more officers stepped forward. Both of them had witnessed the assault. Both had laughed. Both had recorded. Yet now, Dressed in their uniforms and protected by their badges, their lies rolled out smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor," she was shouting aggressively. "Yes," she refused instructions. "Yes," she tried to force her way in. "Yes." Officer Martinez handled the situation professionally. Kesha didn't flinch. Not once, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her breathing steady, her expression still. She had seen hundreds of liars. She had sentenced dozens of corrupt officials. And she knew a simple truth. Liars always talk the loudest right before they fall. The temporary judge nodded along, his mind already made up before she opened her mouth. To him, they were officers. And she was just a woman in a sweater. The snap, the judge, Pierce leaned back. "Well, Ms. Williams, was it?" he said without checking. "It's just Kesha for now." "Your Honor," she replied softly. He took her calmness as weakness, her silence as guilt. He didn't know who she was. He didn't know whose courthouse he was sitting in. He didn't know the legal hurricane quietly forming behind her steady eyes. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" he asked, voice carrying mild impatience. Martinez smirked. The other officers exchanged confident glances. Everyone in that room, thought they, knew exactly who she was. A troublemaker, a nobody, to a woman they could dismiss, restrain, mock, and lie about without consequences. They had no idea they were sitting in her courtroom out on her turf, under her authority. They had no idea the woman they assaulted, the woman they humiliated, was the very judge who had sworn them into duty. But she didn't rush, didn't expose them yet. Because justice is not loud. Justice is strategic. Justice waits for the perfect moment. She slowly stood. Every eye turned toward her. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm, steady, almost gentle. "Your Honor," she said, "I would like to offer my statement." The judge nodded. "Proceed." But Kesha did not start with her story. She did not defend herself. She did not argue against lies. Instead, she set the stage. She looked directly at Judge Pierce, her presence suddenly filling the room with authority no one could understand yet. Then she spoke. "Your Honor, before I continue, please allow me to introduce myself properly." For a moment, the courtroom stayed wrapped in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that happens right before lightning strikes. Judge Pierce shifted uncomfortably. Kesha's voice had a weight to it, a precision, a confidence he wasn't expecting from a trespasser. "Introduce yourself," he repeated, half amused, half annoyed. "You may proceed, Ms. Kesha." But she didn't speak yet. She simply held out her hands. "Your Honor," she said calmly, "before I defend myself, I request that the court produce the security footage from the east entrance between 7:04 and 7:11 a.m. Officer Martinez froze. His smirk flickered. She continued, unfazed. "Additionally, I request access to all recorded body cam footage under 18 U.S. Code Section 242 and Title VII protections, federal laws regarding misuse of authority, discrimination, and deprivation of rights under color of law." The courtroom reacted like someone had dropped a match in gasoline. Murmurs, confusion, heads turning. Officer Ramirez whispered, "Who talks like that?" Another asked under his breath, "Wait, who is she?" Even Judge Pierce leaned forward now, suddenly paying attention. Kesha was done playing the role they forced on her. Now she moved like what she truly was, not a defendant, not a victim, but a master of the law. The courtroom begins to unravel as she listed statutes, precedents, and procedural violations flawlessly. The officers grew paler by the second. Every word she spoke cut through Martinez's lies like glass. Then she took a step forward. "Your Honor," she said, "before any testimony continues, I need the court to formally identify and verify all security personnel involved in this arrest." Judge Pierce blinked. "Why?" Kesha tilted her head, eyes sharp. "So we may attach their statements to the federal review I am filing, effective immediately." A ripple of shock spread through the room. Martinez swallowed hard. The confidence in his eyes started to crack. That it was clear he had lost control. But the confusion wasn't over, because Kesha reached into the small crossbody bag she'd managed to keep with her, and she pulled out something small, golden, and heavy with authority. A badge. Not a police badge. Not a lawyer badge, not a judicial badge. She held it between two fingers, letting the room see the engraved lettering. Superior Court, Judge Kesha M. Williams. The courtroom went dead. Phones stopped recording. Pens stopped moving. Breath stopped midair. Judge Pierce's face drained of color. Someone whispered loudly from the back. That's the judge? The judge? Officer Martinez stumbled backward, hands slipping from his belt. His throat bobbed as he swallowed what felt like a stone. And then, the moment that broke the room entirely. The bailiff, a man who had known her for years, stepped closer. His face shook. His voice trembled. Judge Williams. Every officer snapped their eyes toward her. Courtroom etiquette kicked in instinctively. Their bodies knew before their minds accepted it. People rose. Some stood half out of respect, half out of terror. Some stood because their training demanded it. But everyone stood. Everyone except Martinez, who was too stunned to move. The transformation of her Kesha didn't gloat, didn't yell, didn't say, "I told you so." She simply gave the bailiff a small nod, the kind she always used on hard days. "Please prepare, Chambers," she said softly. He sprinted. Martinez didn't dare breathe. Judge Pierce stuttered. "Your Honor, I had no idea. I mean," she looked at him. Not with anger, with disappointment. "Your duty," she said quietly, "is to judge facts, not appearances." The sentence hit him harder than any slap. She turned, walking with calm authority toward the judge's hallway. The door closed behind her. Inside Chambers, she washed the dried blood from her lip, touched the faint red mark around her throat, breathed deeply. Then she opened the dark oak wardrobe. Inside hung her black robe, the symbol of everything she fought for, everything she protected, everything she refused to let be dishonored. She slipped it on. Its weight felt different today, heavier, stronger, almost alive. She took her gavel from its resting place, ran a thumb across its smooth handle. This tool had delivered justice for thousands. Now, it was time to deliver it for herself. The arcing of the chamber doors opened again. The courtroom gasped. Judge Kesha Williams stepped out, not in jeans and a sweater, not as a victim, not as a suspect, but as the rightful power of that room. Her robe sweeping behind her, her gavel in hand, her chin lifted, her authority unmistakable. She walked to the bench. Every person's eyes followed. Even Judge Pierce stepped aside, stumbling from his seat like it burned him. The bailiff announced her in a shaking voice. "All rise for Judge Kesha Williams." This time, everyone obeyed. Kesha took her seat behind the bench. Her bench. She set down her gavel with a soft but commanding tap that echoed across the room. Her gaze swept over the officers, stopped on Martinez. He was no longer the powerful one, and no longer the man with control, and no longer the authority in the room. He was simply accountable. Her voice cut cleanly through the silent air. "Officer Martinez." She paused, letting the weight of truth sink into him. Remained standing. The unmasking was complete. Justice had arrived. For the first time since the morning began, Officer Martinez looked small. He stood stiffly, eyes darting from the judge's robe to the gavel, as if he hoped this was some nightmare that might still end. But Judge Kesha Williams had no intention of letting him wake up from the truth. She leaned forward, calm but commanding. "Bailiff," she said, "bring in the evidence." A large monitor was rolled into the courtroom. USB drives, body cam reports, security timestamps. Every piece of truth Martinez thought he'd buried under lies. The room sat frozen. The bailiff pressed play. The truth on again. The footage from the east entrance filled the courtroom. First angle. Kesha quietly arriving, hands visible, posture calm. Martinez stepping forward aggressively. .0 protocol, .0 warning. Then the slap. Loud, violent, echoing. The courtroom winced as the sound cracked through the speakers that on screen. Martinez's voice boomed. "Filthy animal. You think you can walk in here?" Gasps burst from the gallery. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another covered her mouth. But the worst was yet to come. Second angle. His hand closing around Kesha's throat, her back hitting the wall, her breath catching. Laughter from other officers. Camera phones raised. and no threat from her, and no resistance. Only violence and humiliation. Then the handcuffs, the cold metal, the shove. The courtroom watched in horror. Judge Pierce bowed his head in shame. Martinez closed his eyes, but Kesha wasn't finished. Now, she said quietly, let's play the body cam files. The audio crackled, and Martinez's voice spilled out again, this time recorded by his own device. Racial slurs, derogatory insults, mocking laughter, casual cruelty. Every word he denied was now echoing across the courtroom like an accusation carved in stone. Martinez flinched as if each slur punched him back. When the clip ended, the silence was suffocating, and no one defended him, and no one even looked at him. His lies weren't just broken. They were obliterated. The investigation, or even Kesha, rested her hands. On the bench, Officer Martinez, she said, voice steady. Your actions today were not an isolated incident. The gallery leaned forward. Over the past 6 months, she continued, I have been conducting a confidential judicial review, an investigation into patterns of police misconduct in this county. Whispers erupted. Martinez's eyes widened. Kesha continued, this court has been monitoring falsified arrests, suppression of body cam footage, intimidation of civilians, and discriminatory policing practices. She clicked her remote. A new slide appeared. Federal watch list. Officer R. Martinez face turned paper white. You were placed on a federal watch list 3 months ago, Kesha said, due to repeated red flags and unresolved allegations. She tapped the next slide. Internal Affairs Complaints, 4740-7. The room shook with disbelief. This, she said, scanning the room, is the number of official complaints filed against Officer Martinez in the last 2 years. Gasps, shock, outrage. A woman in the gallery whispered, that's impossible, but it wasn't. The next slide proved it. Use of force incidents, 28 discrimination allegations, 19 evidence tampering reports. 7 people stared in horror. This, Kesha said, is not a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. The final slide hit hardest. Unconstitutional arrests. 40% of Martinez's arrests, reviewed independently through federal oversight, violated constitutional standards. Everyone looked at him now, not with confusion, not with respect, with disgust. The courtroom, Kesha stood from her seat, robe flowing like a wave of authority. Today's incident, she said, her voice carrying across the room, is the culmination of a long trail of abuse, behavior you believed you could continue without consequence. She looked directly at Martinez. You believed your badge made you untouchable. Her voice hardened. You believed the people you targeted had no power. She stepped closer to the edge of the bench. You believed wrong. Martinez's breathing grew shallow. He looked around, searching for support. But even the officers who once laughed with him now refused to make eye contact. Truth had isolated him. Justice had exposed him. And Kesha had turned the courtroom into the one place he could no longer hide. She lifted a folder. The final blow. Inside were sworn statements, timestamps, whistleblower documents, and federal summaries. Evidence he never knew existed. Officer Martinez, she said, you were never arrested for the incidents in these complaints. Her voice was cold now, but you will answer for them today. The gallery murmured, fear, vindication, relief, anger, all swirling in the air. Kesha set the folder down. The boom of the impact shook the room. Martinez flinched like he had been struck. The judgment begins. This assault, she said, was not committed against a stranger. It was committed against a judge of this court. But that, she added, is not the reason you will face justice. She stepped fully into the authority of the bench. You will face justice because you abused your power, because you humiliated citizens, because you violated the Constitution, because you disgraced the badge you wore. She let the silence stretch, not to intimidate him, but to make the truth unavoidable. Then she delivered the final line, a sentence that felt like the air itself bowed to her authority. Officer Martinez, her voice was ice. Your actions have consequences. The courtroom was silent, not out of fear now, but out of awe. Judge Kesha Williams stood tall on her bench, the same space where she had served justice for years, But today, she was about to change history. Officer Martinez trembled as she lifted her gavel. The weight of every life he'd harmed, every lie he'd told, every abuse he'd committed, hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Kesha inhaled slowly. Her voice, when it came, was firm, steady, and filled with the righteous fire of someone who had survived injustice and turned it into power. Officer Martinez, she began, you have violated not only the laws of this state, but the Constitution of this nation. You have used your authority to harm, to intimidate, to discriminate, and to destroy the lives of innocent citizens. Her words carried no hatred, only truth. And then came the moment no one would ever forget. Therefore, for civil rights violations, falsification of reports, unlawful detainment, assault, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice, her gavel struck once. A thunderclap of accountability. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of early release. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some covered their mouths. Others cried. Justice, real, uncompromised justice, had arrived. Martinez collapsed into his chair, sobbing. The badge that once made him feel untouchable was now the reason he would never walk free again. But Kesha wasn't finished. She turned to the prosecutors. As of this moment, she declared, I am issuing an official directive to reopen 432 closed cases handled by Officer Martinez and the units connected to him. A wave of shock swept the courtroom. Every wrongfully convicted person, she said, will have their case re-examined immediately. Families in the gallery cried out, not in grief, but in hope. This wasn't just justice for her. This was justice for hundreds. Kesha continued, I am also ordering the police department of this county into full federal oversight, effective today. Every officer, every procedure, every arrest will be monitored, audited, and reviewed. This time, the gallery didn't gasp. They applauded. The transformation didn't end in that courtroom. The aftermath that changed, and over the next year, dozens of innocent people were freed. Old convictions reversed. Families reunited. Lives rebuilt. The community, once fractured by fear, began to heal. People marched, not in protest, but in gratitude. School children learned her name. Law students studied her ruling. Young girls pointed to her picture and whispered, I want to be like her. And one morning, with cameras flashing and hundreds gathered on the courthouse steps, the mayor stood beside her with tears in his eyes. In honor of her courage, her integrity, and her unwavering commitment to truth, he said, we rename this courthouse Justice Kesha Williams Federal Courthouse. She didn't seek the spotlight. She didn't crave the praise. But this story, her story, had become a global symbol, a symbol of what happens when the system tries to break the wrong woman, and she turns the breaking into a revolution. People across the world shared her story. Hashtags trended. Documentaries were made. Even victims from other countries wrote to her, because of you, we found courage. Kesha stood on those courthouse steps, overwhelmed but steady as the crowd chanted her name. Not as a judge, not as a victim, but as a reminder. Justice can be delayed. Justice can be challenged. But when justice finally fights back, it changes the world. And so, a story that began with injustice ended with a movement that reshaped a nation. Judge Kesha Williams walked into her courthouse that morning as just another citizen in plain clothes and walked out as a global symbol of courage. Her verdict didn't just punish one corrupt officer. It rebuilt a broken system, freed the innocent, and reminded the world that true justice isn't wear a badge or a robe. It lives in the hearts of those brave enough to stand up for it. Because sometimes it only takes one. Womanto remind the world, justice always finds her way.